"What are you doing here in this cold, Lily?" The words slipped from Vincent Castellano's mouth before he could register the weight they carried. It was too late for anyone to be wandering outside, and the park lay silent, save for the crunch of his Italian leather shoes against the thin crust of snow. He had just left a meeting with the other bosses, the kind of meeting where every word could mean life or death. The night air helped him think. It was the only place no one dared follow. He almost walked past that bench. Just another homeless figure curled beneath layers of worn clothing, like countless others in New York. Over the years, Vincent had trained himself not to look. Not really. It wasn't cruelty. It was habit, armor, a way to preserve the razor-sharp focus that had made him the most feared name in the city's underworld. But something about this particular shape, the way the small frame curled in on itself, the familiar worn-out canvas bag pressed against her side, made him slow down. He hesitated, half annoyed at his own sudden pause, then looked again. His heart skipped. The flickering streetlight cast just enough glow to reveal the outline of her face. The stubborn brown curls, the gentle slope of her cheekbone. Recognition struck him like ice water. "Lily," he breathed. She didn't move. He stepped closer, cautious, unwilling to believe his own instinct. He dropped to one knee. The woman on the bench was Lily Morgan, no mistake, his former housekeeper, the quiet, invisible presence who had worked in his mansion for 2 years, the one he had fired 3 weeks ago for being 5 minutes late. Her lips were blue. Her bare fingers, exposed to the bitter cold, gripped something tightly. Gently, Vincent pried them open, his heart pounding against his ribs. In her palm was a crumpled receipt, a hospital billing statement. Street Agnes Medical Center. Patient, Margaret Morgan. Outstanding balance, $2,847. Final due date, 2 days ago. Beside the paper was a small bundle of cash, singles, a few fives, maybe $95 in total, clutched like it was her last lifeline. Vincent froze. The memory rushed back. 3 weeks ago, that cold morning. He had been furious, a shipment intercepted by the FBI, $2 million gone. His breakfast wasn't ready, the papers weren't organized, and Lily had come through the door a few minutes late, her hair damp with sweat, eyes ringed with exhaustion. She had mumbled something about the train being delayed. He hadn't asked questions. He had simply said, "You're fired," then turned back to his coffee. Now, kneeling beside this bench with her unconscious body trembling beneath a threadbare coat, he understood. She hadn't overslept. She had been working a second job, probably all night at some warehouse or diner, some graveyard shift that paid $9 an hour, scraping together every cent to pay her mother's hospital bill. His throat tightened. Vincent yanked off his cashmere coat and wrapped it around Lily's body. He didn't call 911 cops meant questions. Questions meant complications. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed Dr. Reed, his private physician. "I need you at the 76th Street entrance of Central Park. Now. A woman, she's unconscious. Hypothermic. Don't ask questions." He hung up and looked at her face again, willing her eyes to open. A memory surfaced unbidden, another woman he couldn't save. Not then. Not like this. Tonight, the world had forced him to look. And for the first time in a very long time, Vincent Castellano could not look away. "Hold on," he whispered, his voice steel wrapped in something almost human. "Hold on, Lily. If this story touched your soul, hit that like button so Lily knows she's not alone. Share this with someone who needs to hear that even the darkest nights end. And subscribe, because this is just the beginning of her fight." Dr. Reed arrived within 15 minutes. He had been the Castellano family's private physician for 20 years. Long enough to know he shouldn't ask a single question when Vincent called at 2 o'clock in the morning. He examined Lily right there on the bench, the beam of his flashlight laying bare her ashen skin and the bruised purple of her lips. "Severe hypothermia," he said, his voice low and clinical. "She needs to be warmed up immediately. A hospital will ask for paperwork, for identification, for why she was out on the street in the middle of a winter night." Vincent nodded. He understood. In his world, a hospital meant records. Records meant a trail, and a trail could kill someone faster than a bullet. "Take her to the villa," Vincent ordered. Not a suggestion. An order. They placed Lily in the back seat of the black Mercedes. Vincent sat beside her the entire drive, one hand gripping the cashmere coat wrapped tight around her small, trembling body. He didn't speak. He only watched. And for the first time in many years, Vincent Castellano felt something other than his familiar coldness stirring inside his chest. Lily woke 12 hours later. The first thing she saw was a soaring ceiling carved with intricate patterns. The second was a massive oil painting on the wall, a seascape caught in the teeth of a storm. And the third, the thing that made her heart feel as if it stopped, was realizing she was lying on the sofa in the Castellano villa's living room. She sat up too fast. Her head swam, her limbs shook, and she would have toppled to the floor if someone's hand hadn't steadied her. "Easy," a warm, deep male voice said. It was Dr. Reed, seated in an armchair beside her. "You nearly died last night, Miss Morgan. Hypothermia, prolonged malnutrition, exhaustion. Your body's been at its limit for a long time." Lily swallowed hard. Her throat burned with dryness. Where am I?" "Mr. Castellano's villa," Dr. Reed replied, his tone unshifting. "If he hadn't found you in the park last night, you'd be dead, Miss Morgan. That's the truth." She wanted to say something, to ask why, to understand why the man who had thrown her out 3 weeks ago had pulled her back from death. But before she could even open her mouth, another voice came from the doorway. "Why didn't you say you had nowhere to stay?" Vincent Castellano stood there, leaning against the frame, arms folded across his chest. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a faded tattoo visible along his forearm. His face showed nothing, but his eyes didn't. Those eyes held on her as if they could read every secret she was trying to keep buried. Lily stayed silent. "Doctor." Reed rose, gave Vincent a slight nod, and left the room. The door shut with a soft click, leaving the two of them alone in the vast space washed in the last light of dusk. "I asked you a question," Vincent said, moving closer. "Why didn't you say anything?" Lily lowered her gaze. She knew there was no point in lying. This man had survived the underworld for 20 years by reading people. He'd know the moment she lied. "Because I didn't have anywhere to go," she whispered. "My lease ended 2 months ago. I didn't have enough money to renew it. Everything I earned went to my mother's hospital bills." "So where were you?" Lily lifted her head and met his eyes. "In the storage room, in the basement of this villa, for the past month." Silence. Vincent didn't speak. No anger, no surprise, no contempt. Just a silence as thick as fog, and Lily couldn't read a single thing from his face. He walked to the table and picked up the crumpled hospital invoice she'd been clutching in her hand all through the night before. He set it down in front of her. "How much does your mother need?" Lily didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in 8 years, after 8 years of working without rest, after 8 years of swallowing her tears, after 8 years of pretending to be strong, the tears spilled out. Not because she was sad, but because she didn't have the strength to hold them back anymore. "I don't need your pity," she said, her voice trembling even as she tried to cling to the last shred of pride she had left. Vincent looked at her, and for the first time, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Not a smile, just something that resembled recognition. "Good," he said, "because I don't have that." The next morning, Lily woke before dawn. She lay still on the soft sofa, staring up at the ceiling as the darkness thinned, and wondered what she was doing here. She didn't belong in this place. She never had. And she needed to leave before everything became more complicated. She sat up as quietly as she could, and put on the old clothes someone had washed and neatly folded on the chair. She hadn't brought anything with her. The worn canvas bag, the hospital bill, the handful of loose change she had left, all of it sat on the table by the door. She picked them up, slid them into her coat pocket, and walked toward the front entrance. Her fingers had barely touched the doorknob when a voice sounded behind her. "Miss Morgan." Lily turned. It was Sal, the guard she'd seen a few times back when she worked here. He was a large man with a face full of scars, yet his eyes were strangely gentle. He stood between her and the door, not threatening, but clearly not planning to move. "The boss wants to see you," Sal said, "before you leave." Lily wanted to refuse, wanted to say she didn't owe Vincent Castellano anything. But she knew that wasn't true. He'd saved her life last night, and in this world, a debt like that wasn't something you could simply walk away from. She nodded and followed Sal up to the second floor. Vincent's study was at the end of the hallway, behind a heavy oak door carved with classic patterns. Sal knocked, waited for a "come in" from inside, then opened the door and let her step through. The room was darker than Lily expected. The curtains were drawn tight, and the only light came from a desk lamp, spilling over the glossy surface of black oak. The air carried a faint trace of cigar smoke, mixed with the scent of leather and old wood. Vincent sat behind the desk, a file open in front of him, a fountain pen in his hand. He didn't look up when she entered, only gestured for her to sit in the chair across from him. Lily sat and waited. The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Vincent set the pen down, closed the file, and looked straight at her. "I called St. Agnes Hospital this morning," he said, as calmly as if he were talking about the weather. "Your mother's medical bill. $50,000. including the heart surgery scheduled in 2 weeks. I paid it in full. Lily went rigid. She was sure she'd misheard him. $50,000. It was the kind of money she would have had to work her whole life to earn. The kind of money she'd clawed after, drained herself for, sacrificed sleep and health for 8 years. And it still was never enough. And he had wiped it away with a single phone call in the morning. Why? She asked, her voice raw. Why would you do that? Vincent tilted his head, watching her with an expression she couldn't decode. Because I have an offer for you. He slid a sheet of paper across the desk. Be my house manager. Salary of $5,000 a month. You'll stay at the villa. You'll have your own room. You'll have medical insurance. The $50,000 debt will be deducted gradually from your pay. 10 months, and you'll be free. Lily stared at the paper. It was an employment contract, printed and ready, waiting only for her signature. Everything was clear, legal, even more generous than any job she'd ever had. But she wasn't stupid. She'd lived long enough to know nobody gave anything for nothing, especially not someone like Vincent Castellano. What's the condition? She asked. Vincent smiled. Not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just watched its prey step into a trap. You're smart, he said. I like that. He stood, circled around the desk, and stopped directly in front of her. The distance between them was so small she could smell the expensive cologne along his collar. You'll see things you shouldn't see, Vincent said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You'll hear things you shouldn't hear. And the one rule, the most important rule, is silence. You won't say a word to anyone outside this house. Not family, not friends, not the police, no one. If you talk, I'll know. And you won't like the consequences. Lily understood then. This wasn't kindness. This wasn't charity. This was Vincent's way of keeping her within reach. She'd lived in this villa for a month without him knowing. She'd seen faces, heard calls, learned secrets an ordinary person was never meant to know. He hadn't saved her out of mercy. He'd saved her because she was a potential risk, and the best way to control a risk was to keep it where he could see it. Lily looked down at the contract. Then she looked up at Vincent. My mother needs that surgery, she said. In 2 weeks. If she doesn't get it, she'll die. I know. And if I sign, you guarantee she'll have the operation? Yes. Lily picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She'd made harder decisions than this. She'd sold her sleep, her health, her youth. Selling one more thing didn't feel any different. She signed her name. Vincent took the contract, glanced at her signature, then gave a satisfied nod. He opened a desk drawer, took out a bright silver key, and placed it in her hand. Your room is on the 3rd floor, he said. Sal will take you up. Lily stood, closing her fingers around the key until it pressed into her palm. She walked toward the door, but before she could open it, Vincent's voice came from behind her. Welcome to hell, Lily Morgan. She didn't turn around. She simply stepped out, closed the door behind her, and wondered what she had just signed. She'd sold her soul to save her mother, and the only question left was how much the real price would be. 2 weeks passed faster than Lily expected. She adapted to her new life at the Castellano villa the only way she knew how, by working hard and keeping her mouth shut. Managing the household turned out not to be so different from what she'd done before, only larger in scale, and with consequences for mistakes that were far more severe. 12 staff members reported to her, including the chef, the cleaners, the gardener, and a few people she couldn't say exactly what they did, other than stand in corners with watchful eyes. She built schedules, assigned tasks, made sure meals were served on time, rooms were cleaned properly, and no one asked questions they shouldn't ask. She learned quickly because she didn't have any other choice. In the early days, she tried not to look at the men in black suits with suspicious bulges under their arms, not to look at the glossy black cars idling out front at midnight, not to look at the meetings that stretched into morning in Vincent's study, with Italian voices leaking through the closed door. But no matter how hard she tried not to look, she still saw. And no matter how hard she tried not to listen, she still heard. It was a survival instinct she'd honed over 8 years at the bottom of society. Watch, remember, and never let it show that you knew anything at all. Marco Benedetti was the first to notice her. He was Vincent's right hand, a 40-year-old man with salt and pepper hair and eyes sharp as a razor. In the beginning, he watched her with open suspicion, tracked every step she took, tested every decision she made. But by the end of the 2nd week, that look shifted. The suspicion was gone, replaced by something that resembled reluctant respect. Do you know the most important rule here? Marco asked one afternoon as she checked the list of supplies that needed to be ordered. Lily looked up. Silence. Marco nodded. Right. But there's one more rule. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Don't trust anyone, even the ones who seem the friendliest. Lily didn't ask who he meant, but she already had her own answer. Julian Cross, the underboss of the organization, a 42-year-old man with a wide smile and a generosity so polished it made her uneasy. He was too friendly, too attentive, always asking if she was settling into the work, if she needed help, if she was missing anything. And every time he spoke to her, Lily felt as if a spider were crawling along her spine. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Very wrong. She just didn't know what yet. Until one night, as she walked the hallway for one last check before bed, she heard Julian's voice drifting out of a small room near the staircase. He was on the phone, his tone low and urgent. But Lily was used to hearing things people didn't want her to hear. The plan is still on schedule, Julian said. The right time will come. Just be patient. Then he fell silent, listening to the person on the other end, and answered with a soft chuckle. Don't worry. He doesn't suspect a thing. Lily didn't stop. She kept walking, her footsteps steady as if she hadn't heard anything at all. But her heart was hammering in her chest, and her mind was storing every word. A plan. The right time. He doesn't suspect. She didn't know who Julian was talking about, or what he was planning. But she knew one thing. In this world, secret midnight calls never brought anything good. She kept that information to herself. It wasn't time to speak. It wasn't time to trust anyone. 3 days later, she got a call from the hospital. Her mother's surgery had been a success. She was recovering well and would be discharged within a week. Lily sat on the bed in her small room on the 3rd floor, staring out the window, and for the first time in many years, she cried. Not tears of pain or despair, but tears of relief, of happiness, of a massive burden finally falling away. Her mother would live. After everything she'd sacrificed, her mother would live. That afternoon, Lily stood out in the yard talking with Sal about next week's delivery schedule. She laughed at one of his stupid jokes, the first truly natural laugh since she'd come here. She didn't know that from a 2nd-floor window, Vincent Castellano was watching. He watched her smile, watched the late afternoon sun catch in her curly brown hair, watched the way her shoulders loosened for the first time since he'd found her on that park bench that night. And for the first time in many years, Vincent asked himself a question he didn't have an answer to. What would she have been like if life had been kinder? But life wasn't kind. Life was never kind to people like Lily Morgan. And the darkness was coming, far closer than she thought. 1 week after her mother was discharged, Lily was assigned a new job. The records storage room in the basement needed to be reorganized, and none of the 12 employees under her wanted to take it. That room was a maze of dusty filing cabinets, cardboard boxes stacked from floor to ceiling, and thousands of documents that had never been properly sorted. Marco told her the job could take a few weeks, and she was allowed to go down there anytime she wanted as long as it didn't interfere with her main duties. Lily didn't complain. In truth, she was almost grateful. The storage room was quiet and lonely, far from watchful eyes, far from Julian Cross with his too wide smile, far from everything that tightened her nerves every day. She started with the oldest boxes, sorting by year and by category. Invoices, contracts, financial reports, receipts. Most of it was dull. Numbers and signatures she didn't understand and didn't need to understand. But by the 3rd day, she began to notice something wasn't right. First, the duplicate invoices. Same vendor, same amount, same description of goods, but different dates. Once could be an error, twice could be coincidence, but 5 times, 10 times, with amounts in the tens of thousands of dollars each time. That was no longer an error. Then came the financial reports that didn't match. The income column and the expense column didn't balance, with discrepancies of hundreds of thousands of dollars and no explanation. And finally, the thing that truly sent cold down Lily's spine. The signatures. Vincent Castellano's signature appeared on dozens of documents from different days, but they were perfectly identical. Not identical in the way the same person signs. Identical in the way something is copied, stamped, forged. Lily wasn't a signature expert, but she'd watched Vincent sign her employment contract. She remembered how he held the pen, remembered the distinct slant, remembered the way he always drew a line beneath his name. The signatures on these documents didn't have that underline. She kept searching, her heart beating faster with every page she turned. And then she found it. A transfer agreement. $3 million. From the organization's account to an account in the Cayman Islands, the world's most famous tax haven for people who wanted to hide money. At the bottom of the document were 2 signatures. The first was Julian Cross's, clear and heavy. The second was labeled Vincent Castellano, but Lily knew at once it was fake. She sat down on the floor, the paper trembling in her hands, and tried to put in order what she'd just uncovered. Julian Cross was siphoning money from the organization. Not thousands, but millions of dollars. And he was using a forged Vincent signature to cover the trail, so when it was discovered, Vincent would take the blame. The phone call that night, the plan, the right time. He doesn't suspect a thing. Now Lily understood who Julian had been talking about, but that understanding put her in a position that couldn't be more dangerous. If she told Vincent and she was wrong, she would die. No one survived after falsely accusing the underboss of a mafia organization. But if she stayed silent and Julian succeeded, Vincent would be brought down, maybe killed, and she, the person who knew too much, would be the next target. She slid the document back where it belonged and went on working as usual, but her mind spun with hundreds of questions that had no answers. The next day, Julian appeared in the storage room. He stood in the doorway, his familiar smile on his mouth, but his eyes were sharper and colder than Lily had ever seen. "You're working too hard," he said. "Down here all day. Doesn't it get lonely?" Lily smiled, the smile she'd practiced for 8 years serving wealthy people. "I like the quiet, Mr. Cross, and this work needs to be finished." Julian studied her for a long moment, then nodded and walked away. But from that day on, she felt someone watching her, not always visible, but she could sense it. And then Vanessa appeared, Julian's sister, a 32-year-old woman with shining blonde hair and a sweet smile. She introduced herself as the new office assistant, and quickly found ways to get close to Lily, inviting her for coffee, asking about her family, telling stories about life in New York. Lily stayed cautious. She answered harmless questions, offered details that didn't matter, and never once mentioned the storage room or anything she'd seen. But she knew Vanessa hadn't come to make a friend. She had come to watch, to measure whether Lily was a threat. That night, after the whole villa had fallen asleep, Lily went back to the storage room. She brought the old phone she'd hidden since before she came here, not the phone Vincent had given her, because she knew that one could be monitored. She photographed each document, one by one, the duplicate invoices, the mismatched reports, the forged signatures, and most important, the transfer agreement sending $3 million to the Cayman Islands. When she finished, she pried off the sole of her shoe, slipped the phone inside, and sealed it back carefully. No one would find it there. Now she had proof. The question was who to give it to. 3 days after taking those photos, Lily still didn't know what to do. She carried the secret the way you carried a timed bomb, every passing second tightening the strain in her chest. Vanessa still appeared every day with her sweet smile and seemingly harmless questions. And Lily still played the obedient house manager who knew nothing. But she knew she couldn't keep living like this. Julian was planning something big, and time was running out. On the 4th night, when the whole villa had sunk into darkness and the steady breathing of sleep, Lily rose from her bed. She dressed in silence, pulled the old phone from the sole of her shoe, and stepped into the hallway. Her feet carried her to Vincent's study door before her mind could stop her. She stood there, staring at the heavy oak door, and her hand trembled. Not from cold, from fear. She knew what she was about to do could be the last decision of her life. If she was wrong, if Vincent didn't believe her, if Julian had some way to convince him she was lying, she would be dead before dawn. No one would find her body. No one would ever know what happened. Her mother would wait for a call that would never come. But if she stayed silent, if she let Julian carry out his plan, Vincent would die or be overthrown, and she, the one who knew too much, would be the next target. Either way, she would die. At least this way. She still had a choice. She knocked. The sound cut through the night like thunder. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds. Then Vincent's voice came from inside. "Come in." She pushed the door open and stepped in. Vincent sat behind his desk, the desk lamp casting hard bands of light and shadow across his face. He was reading a file, but he looked up when she entered, and for the first time since Lily had known him, she saw real surprise on that face. No one came to Vincent Castellano's study at 2 o'clock in the morning. No one dared come here uninvited. "Miss Morgan," he said, not sleepy at all. "What is it?" Lily didn't answer with words. She walked to the desk, set the old phone down, and opened the photo library. The images she'd taken in the storage room filled the small screen. Duplicate invoices, mismatched reports, forged signatures, and the transfer agreement sending $3 million to the Cayman Islands. "I think you should see this," she said. That was all. No explanation, no defense. Vincent picked up the phone and began scrolling through each photo. His face stayed blank, hard as stone, revealing no thought, no feeling. The silence stretched. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Lily stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, waiting for her sentence. At last, Vincent set the phone down. He lifted his eyes to her, dark as a moonless night. "You know if you're wrong, you'll die?" Lily nodded. "I know. And you still came here." "I know," she repeated, calmer than she expected. "But if I stay silent and you die, I die too. Julian won't let anyone who knows too much survive. At least this way. I get to choose." Vincent watched her for a long moment. Then he asked a question Lily didn't expect. "Why do you trust me enough to say this?" Lily didn't blink. "I don't trust you." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you here?" "Because I trust that you hate betrayal more than you hate me," Lily said. "Julian is putting a knife in your back, taking your money, using your forged signature to cover it up. Whether you believe me or not, you'll investigate. And when you investigate, you'll find the truth. I'm just the person telling you where to look." Silence. Then a sound filled the room that Lily had never heard before. Laughter. Vincent Castellano was laughing. Not warm or joyful. It was cold laughter. Sharp. Dangerous. But inside it was a note that resembled appreciation. A kind of recognition for a worthy opponent. "You're smarter than I thought, Lily Morgan," he said, rising and circling around the desk. "Much smarter." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell cigar smoke and whiskey on him. "Tonight you stay here, in this room. Don't leave Marco's sight until I tell you you can." Lily nodded. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She knew the game had begun, and she had just wagered everything she had. That night, Lily slept on the sofa in Vincent's study, while Marco stood guard outside the door. She didn't truly sleep. She only lay still in the dark, listening to footsteps pacing back and forth on the other side of the oak. Vincent had vanished the moment he ordered her to stay, and she didn't know where he'd gone or what he was doing. She only knew that when dawn slipped through the curtains, everything had changed. Vincent came back at 6 o'clock in the morning, with Marco and a woman Lily had never seen before. She was about 45, with neatly cropped black hair, dressed in a gray suit like a businesswoman, carrying a thick leather briefcase. Vincent introduced her as Rebecca Walsh, the organization's chief accountant for 12 years, one of the very few people he trusted without reservation. And from this moment on, Lily had been added to that short list as well. There was no precedent for it. A house manager, a former maid, a woman with no power and no connections in the underworld, now sitting in the same room as the people who held the life and death secrets of the entire organization. Lily didn't know whether to feel honored or terrified. Maybe both. Rebecca opened the briefcase and began spreading documents across the desk. Numbers, charts, reports. Lily couldn't fully understand, but enough to recognize the severity of what they were facing. $8 million, Rebecca said, her voice cold as steel. In the past 18 months, Julian has pulled $8 million from the organization's accounts through shell companies and fake invoices. The money has been transferred to at least 5 different accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore. She looked at Vincent, then at Lily. Miss Morgan was right, and if she hadn't found it, we might never have known until it was too late. Vincent nodded, his face unreadable, but his eyes burning. "What's Julian preparing for?" Marco spoke up, his voice low and thoughtful. "With that kind of money, either he's getting ready to disappear, or he's getting ready for a coup. And with what Miss Morgan heard on that phone call, I'm leaning toward the second." Silence settled over the room. Lily could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of the decisions about to be made, the lives about to be decided, and she, the woman who had once lain freezing on a park bench, was now sitting at the center of it. "We won't wait for him to strike first," Vincent said at last. "We flipped the board." The plan took shape over the next 2 hours. A meeting of the capos would be held tomorrow, the official reason a discussion of expanding the business into real estate. But in truth, it was a trap. Vincent would bring up an account in the Cayman Islands that needed to be reviewed, would mention mismatched numbers, would watch Julian's reaction and let him expose himself in front of everyone. And Lily, she had a particular role. "You keep acting normal," Vincent told her. "Work, talk to Vanessa. Don't let anyone suspect anything has changed. Julian is watching you, and if you act different, he'll know." Lily nodded. She'd been acting all her life, playing the invisible maid, playing the woman who knew nothing, playing the woman with no feelings when she was humiliated or dismissed. Putting on one more mask wouldn't be hard. She went back to her daily work as if nothing had happened, building schedules, assigning staff, checking deliveries. And when Vanessa appeared with her sweet smile and probing questions, Lily answered with just enough friendliness to avoid suspicion, but Vanessa grew sharper by the day. She asked about the storage room, asked if Lily had found anything interesting down there, asked why she spent so much time in the basement. Lily smiled and said there was nothing interesting at all, only old papers and dust, and she went down because it was the job she'd been given. She performed flawlessly. She had learned to wear her mask a long time ago, back in the years she served wealthy families who never looked at her as a human being. The night before the meeting, Vincent called her into his study. He stood by the window, staring out at the city sinking into darkness, his back to her. A long time passed before he spoke. "Tomorrow, no matter what happens, you stay beside Marco. Do you understand?" "I understand." Vincent turned to look at her, his eyes dark as a moonless night, yet holding something Lily couldn't decipher. "You risked your life for me," he said. "I'm not used to owing anyone anything, but I'll remember this." Lily didn't know what to say. She only nodded and turned to leave. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Outside the window, the city still glowed, still roared, still lived, as if tomorrow were just another ordinary day. But Lily knew tomorrow wouldn't be ordinary. Tomorrow, blood could spill. Tomorrow, people could die. And she, the woman who had once only wanted to earn enough money to pay her mother's hospital bills, was now caught in the middle of a war she had never asked to join. She wondered who would still be alive tomorrow. The board had been flipped, but in this world, even the winner could lose. The meeting began at 8 o'clock at night. The large conference room on the second floor of the villa was packed with the most dangerous men in New York. 7 capos, 7 captains controlling 7 different territories of the city, each bringing at least one bodyguard to stand behind him. The air hung heavy with cigar smoke and an unspoken strain. Lily wasn't in the meeting room. She'd been placed in a small room next door, where she could hear everything through a thin door, but no one could see her. Marco stood just outside her door, ready to protect her if anything happened. She sat in the chair, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles had gone white, and listened. Vincent opened the meeting in the low, commanding voice she'd come to know. He talked about expanding into real estate, about new investment opportunities, about how the organization needed to diversify its income to reduce the risk tied to traditional operations. The men listened, nodding now and then, asking questions now and then. Everything sounded normal, until Vincent mentioned the account in the Cayman Islands. To carry out this plan, we need to review the organization's finances from top to bottom, Vincent said, still calm as if he were talking about the weather, especially the Cayman Islands account. "I've noticed some numbers don't line up over the past 18 months, and I want everything clear before we move forward with a major investment." Silence. Lily held her breath, her ears straining for every sound. And then she heard Julian's voice, the voice she'd learned to recognize and hate, trembling in a way he couldn't hide. "Vincent, I don't think we need to complicate things. The organization's finances have always been stable. It's probably just a minor bookkeeping error." "A minor error?" Vincent repeated, colder now. $8 million is a minor error to you, Julian." A terrifying silence. Lily could picture Julian's face draining of color, could feel the other capo's eyes shifting from Vincent to Julian and back again. $8 million has disappeared over the past 18 months. Vincent went on, no longer calm, sharp as a blade, moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore, through shell companies and fake invoices. And all of it carries my signature, except there's one problem. I never signed any of those documents. Chairs scraped. Footsteps. The metallic click of guns being readied. "Julian, I think we need to talk privately," Vincent said, his voice cold as steel. "No one leaves this room." Lily heard a door slam, heard heavy steps shifting. Then Julian again, his confidence gone, almost pleading. "Vincent, this is a misunderstanding. I can explain." "Explain?" Vincent laughed, a sound so icy it made Lily shiver even in the room next door. "Explain why you siphoned money from the organization? Explain why you forged my signature? Explain why you were planning a coup?" Then everything happened fast. Gunshots. Not one, but 3 in rapid succession. A short, painful scream. A body hitting the floor. Then silence. Terrible silence. Lily sat rigid in the chair, her heart slamming in her chest, her hands shaking so hard she had to wrap her arms around herself. She didn't know who had shot whom. Didn't know if Vincent was alive or dead. Didn't know whether she should run or stay. Her door opened. Marco stood there, his face as unreadable as always, but a small streak of blood marked his collar. "It's done," he said. "You can come out." Lily stepped into the hallway, on unsteady legs. The meeting room door was still shut, but she didn't want to look inside. She didn't need to look to know what had happened. Vincent stood at the end of the hall, speaking urgently with one of the capos. When he saw Lily, he ended the conversation and walked toward her. Vanessa wasn't there, he said, tight with tension. Someone warned her before the meeting. She's gone. Lily understood what that meant at once. Julian was dead, but his sister was still alive. And from what Lily had observed in the past weeks, Vanessa wasn't the kind of woman who would run and forget. She would come back. She would take revenge. Vincent looked at Lily, his eyes dark, but holding something Lily had never seen in them before. Something like gratitude. You saved my life tonight, Lily Morgan. Lily met his gaze, and for the first time since she'd signed that contract, she felt she was standing on equal ground with this man. We're even, she said. Julian Cross was dead. But Vanessa was still alive, and she wasn't the kind of woman who forgave. The next morning, the Castellano villa was quiet, as if last night had never happened. No one mentioned Julian Cross. No one asked where he'd gone. No one even looked toward the conference room where Lily knew there was still blood that hadn't been fully wiped away. That was the law of this world. The dead disappeared, and the living kept living as if they had never existed. Lily learned that quickly. She went down to the dining room at 7 o'clock in the morning like always, checked the schedule with the chef, assigned tasks to the staff, and didn't once bring up anything connected to the night before. But she realized something had shifted in the way people looked at her. Curious glances, whispers when she passed, respectful nods from people who had never looked at her before. And when Vincent called a meeting with the remaining capos that afternoon, he told her to be present. Not in the next room like last night, in the meeting room itself, seated beside Marco, facing the most powerful men in the city. Vincent didn't make any official announcement. He simply introduced her as his new advisor, the person who would be responsible for overseeing the organization's financial and internal operations. No formal title, no ceremony, but everyone understood what it meant that she was sitting there. The capos' reactions weren't the same. Some nodded in acceptance, perhaps because they'd heard about her role in uncovering Julian's betrayal. But others didn't bother to hide their irritation. Lily heard the murmurs as she walked in. "A maid?" Someone whispered loudly enough for her to hear. She didn't react. She only took her seat and waited. The meeting began with discussion of the expansion plan Vincent had mentioned the night before, this time real rather than a trap. The capos gave their opinions, proposed options, argued over numbers and risks. Lily listened in silence for the first hour. Then, when one of the capos finished presenting a plan to invest in a Manhattan real estate project, she spoke. "There are 3 holes in this plan," she said, calm and clear. "First, the partner you're proposing has filed for bankruptcy twice in the past 10 years and is currently under investigation for tax fraud. Second, the parcel you want to buy is in an area slated for rezoning by the city, and it could be taken back at any time. Third, the profit numbers you're presenting are based on the assumption that property values will rise by 20% every year, which hasn't happened at any point over the past decade." Silence. Everyone in the room stared at her, as if she'd grown an extra head. The capo who had presented went red, his mouth opening, but nothing came out. Vincent didn't speak. He only gave a slight nod toward Lily, with a smile so small it was almost invisible. After the meeting, Marco followed her into the hallway. "You're not as simple as I thought," he said, a respect in his voice that hadn't been there before. "I underestimated you." Lily didn't answer. She just smiled and kept walking. The days that followed passed in a surprising calm. Lily adapted to her new role, joined meetings, reviewed financial reports, offered observations. Vincent listened to more and more. She called her mother every evening, talked about her new job without mentioning any detail that could worry her. She joked with Sal about the weather and scraps of news. She even began having coffee with Vincent each morning, sitting in his study and discussing the day's plans. She started to relax, started to feel safe, started to forget Vanessa was still out there. Until one night, when she was getting ready for bed, her phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "My brother died because of you. You'll pay." Lily read it 3 times, her heart pounding out of control. She took the phone to Vincent immediately. He read the message, his face unreadable, then called Marco. Security was tightened. More guards, more cameras, more eyes watching every corner of the villa. But Vincent knew, and Lily knew too, that Vanessa wouldn't be easy to catch. She was waiting for the right moment. 2 weeks passed and nothing happened. No more messages. No sign of Vanessa. Lily slowly relaxed again, slowly let go of the fear that had tightened her chest every night. She almost forgot the message, until she shouldn't have. The biggest mistake isn't being afraid. It's stopping being afraid too soon. That night, after a long day of tense meetings and hard decisions, Lily couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs, meaning to make herself a cup of tea, but her feet carried her to Vincent's study door instead. Light still leaked through the crack. She hesitated, then knocked softly. "Come in." Vincent sat behind the desk, but there were no papers, no files in front of him, only a half-finished glass of whiskey and the desk lamp throwing shadows across a tired face. He watched Lily step inside without surprise, as if he'd known she would come. "Can't sleep?" he asked. Lily shook her head and sat in the chair across from him without waiting to be invited. The past 2 weeks had changed something between them, from employer and hired help into something harder to name. They sat in silence for a long time. No one spoke, only the tick of the clock on the wall and the distant pulse of the city through the window. Then Vincent spoke, and his voice was different than usual, lower, softer, as if he were talking to himself more than to her. "Do you know why I stopped that night?" he asked. "In the park. Why I didn't walk past that bench the way I've walked past hundreds of others." Lily stayed quiet, waiting. She knew he didn't need an answer from her. "I grew up in South Brooklyn," Vincent said, his gaze fixed on nothing, as if it were fixed on the past. "So poor there were days we had nothing to eat. My mother, Maria, worked in a textile factory, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week, just to have enough to pay rent and put food in front of me." He paused and took a sip of whiskey. "She got sick with lung disease, dust from the mill. She coughed up blood for the last 2 years of her life. But there was no money for a hospital. I was 12 when she died. I sat beside her the whole last night, watching her fight for every breath. And I couldn't do anything. No money, no help, nothing." A heavy silence settled over the room. Lily felt her throat tighten. "That night in the park," Vincent went on, his voice almost a whisper. "When I saw you on that bench, lips purple, your hand clenched around loose change and a hospital bill. I didn't see you. I saw my mother. I saw Maria dying all over again. And this time, I had money. This time, I could do something." Lily didn't know what to say. She sat there, looking at the most powerful man in New York's underworld, with eyes that had changed. He wasn't a monster. He was an orphaned boy who had built an empire from the ashes of a poor childhood. "My father left when I was 5, she said at last, her voice light as breath. "I don't remember his face. I only remember my mother crying for a week, and then she got up and went to work. She worked 3 jobs at once to raise me. I dropped out of school at 19 when she got sick. For the past 8 years, I've done anything to survive. Cleaning, waiting tables, night shifts in warehouses, anything that brought in money." She looked at Vincent, and for the first time, she felt someone truly understood her. Not pity, not judgment, just the pure understanding of 2 people who had lived without a safety net, who had fallen and stood up again on their own, who knew what hunger and cold and despair felt like. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of 2 people who didn't need words to understand each other. "You're different from the others, Lily," Vincent said at last. "You're not afraid of me." Lily gave a small smile. "I'm afraid, but I'm used to fear. It's been my companion for 8 years. Vincent looked at her, his eyes dark, yet holding something warmer than she'd ever seen in them before. Then he reached out and touched her hand on the arm of the chair. Just a second. Just a light touch, almost invisible. Then he pulled his hand back, as if he'd touched fire. It was the closest thing to tenderness Vincent Castellano could give. And Lily knew it. Some things didn't need to be spoken, but some things shouldn't be started. A month had passed since that night in Vincent's study. A month in which Lily almost forgot what kind of world she was living in. Everything ran with an ease that felt unsettling in its own way. She was officially in charge of the organization's legitimate side, the restaurant chain, the real estate company, and several other small businesses used for laundering but also turning real profit. She proposed improvements, cut unnecessary costs, restructured parts of the operation, and Vincent accepted almost all of it. The capos stopped whispering. They'd watched her work, they'd seen the numbers she delivered, and whether they liked it or not, they had to admit she was capable. Marco treated her like a reliable ally. Sal still joked with her every day. And Vincent, he watched her with an expression she didn't dare interpret, an expression that held something beyond respect. Yet neither of them ever mentioned that night. Lily started to believe everything would be fine, that Vanessa had given up and vanished, that she could live this new life without looking over her shoulder every day. She was wrong. Vanessa hadn't disappeared. She was only waiting, planning, searching for the perfect moment, and she found it. After fleeing the villa on the night Julian was killed, Vanessa contacted the Moreno family, the Castellanos' longtime enemy. She offered information, offered loyalty, in exchange for one thing and one thing only: revenge. The Moreno family wasn't stupid. They knew attacking Vincent directly would be suicide. He had too many men, too much money, too much influence. But Vanessa showed them a weakness no one expected. Lily Morgan, the maid who'd become an advisor. The woman Vincent Castellano looked at with an intensity he'd never given anyone. The single weak point of a man who was supposed to have none. That afternoon, Lily was sitting in her small second-floor office, reviewing the quarterly financial report, when her phone vibrated. The incoming number showed St. Agnes Hospital, where her mother still had routine follow-ups after surgery. She answered, and a woman's voice came through, professional and urgent, asking if she was Miss Morgan and saying she was calling from St. Agnes, that Lily's mother, Margaret Morgan, had just been brought into the emergency room, that her condition was very serious, and that Lily needed to come immediately. Lily's heart seemed to stop. Every rational thought, every hard lesson about caution she'd learned over the past months, all of it vanished. What remained was pure fear, the fear of losing her mother, the fear she'd lived with for 8 years. She didn't think. She didn't tell anyone. She just ran. She ran down the stairs, ran to the parking area, jumped into the car Vincent had allowed her to use, and drove. She didn't notice Sal calling after her. She didn't notice Marco searching for her inside the villa. She noticed nothing but the road ahead and the frantic pounding in her chest. She'd been driving about 10 minutes when everything happened. A black truck suddenly swung across the road, blocking her path. Lily slammed the brakes, her car skidding on wet pavement and stopping only a few yards from the truck. Before she could react, her door was yanked open. 2 men dressed in black, their faces covered, dragged her out. She screamed, she fought, she tried to resist, but they were too strong and too fast. A cloth bag dropped over her head, a needle bit into her neck, and the world folded into darkness. It all took 30 seconds. Lily's phone fell onto the road during the struggle, the screen cracking when it struck hard plastic. But inside it, the location tracking still worked, still broadcasting a signal no one knew was being followed or not. 2 hours later, Marco knocked on Lily's door for the 3rd time, and got no answer. Unease tightened in him. She never vanished without telling someone. He checked the parking area. Her car was gone. He called her phone. No one picked up. He called St. Agnes Hospital. They said no patient named Margaret Morgan had been brought into the emergency room today. That was the moment Marco knew something was wrong. He mobilized his people, traced the GPS signal from Lily's car, and found it abandoned on a deserted road on the outskirts of Brooklyn. The driver's door hung open. There was no sign of Lily, only the shattered phone on the pavement, its screen showing the last call from an unidentified number. Marco picked up the broken phone and drove back to the villa. He walked into Vincent's study without knocking, something that hadn't happened once in the 20 years he'd served this man. He set the cracked phone on the desk in front of Vincent and said, "Lily is missing. Someone took her." Vincent stared at the phone, then at Marco, then back at the phone again. And for the first time in 20 years, Marco saw his boss's hand tremble. Lily woke in darkness. Her head throbbed like it was being split by a hammer, and when she tried to open her eyes, she realized she couldn't see anything. Not because it was dark, but because something was covering her eyes. She tried to move and discovered her hands were bound tight behind her back, the rope biting into her wrists every time she struggled. Her face ached, especially along her left cheek, as if someone had hit her while she was unconscious. She was lying on a surface that was hard and cold, probably concrete, and the air around her smelled damp and rotten, like she was in some kind of basement. She forced herself to breathe, to steady her mind, to remember what had happened. The call from the hospital, the empty road, the black truck, men in black, the needle in her neck, then darkness. She'd been kidnapped, and she knew exactly who was behind it. Footsteps sounded nearby, then light burst in when someone yanked the cloth off her eyes. Lily squinted, trying to adjust to the harsh glare of a bare bulb hanging overhead, and when she could see clearly, she saw Vanessa standing in front of her. Vanessa no longer wore the fake sweetness she'd used to get close to Lily in those first weeks. Her face was ice cold, her eyes burning with a hatred she didn't bother to hide. She was dressed in black from head to toe, hair pulled up tight, and in her hand was a gun she didn't bother to conceal. "Finally awake," Vanessa said, her voice like frost. "I was worried you'd miss the best part." Lily didn't speak. She only watched Vanessa, fighting to keep her face blank even as her heart slammed in her chest. Vanessa stepped closer, knelt in front of Lily, close enough that Lily could smell the expensive perfume of the woman who had taken her. "My brother died because of you," Vanessa said, her voice shaking with hatred. "Do you have any idea how much it hurt?" 3 bullets, 10 minutes to die. 10 minutes on the floor, staring at the ceiling, knowing no one was coming to save him. Lily swallowed hard. She knew begging wouldn't help. Vanessa didn't want an apology or a plea for mercy. She wanted revenge, and nothing Lily said would change that. But Lily wasn't going to lie there like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered, either. "Killing me won't bring your brother back," she said, calmer than she expected. Vanessa laughed, a cold sound with no warmth in it. "No," she admitted, "but it'll hurt Vincent Castellano, and that's enough." Vanessa stood and walked toward a camera set up on a tripod in the corner. She turned it on, adjusted the angle to capture Lily on the floor with her hands bound and her face bruised. Then Vanessa stepped into the frame, stared straight into the lens, and spoke. "Vincent Castellano, here's a small gift from me. Your girl, the girl you let sit beside you, the girl you thought you could protect. She's here, with me. 1 life for 1 life. You have 72 hours to surrender yourself. If you don't, I'll send her back to you, piece by piece." Vanessa shut off the camera and smiled at Lily before leaving the room, leaving her alone in darkness and silence. At the same time, back at the Castellano villa, Vincent was sitting in his study when his phone received a message from an unknown number. A video. He opened it and watched in silence. His face didn't change as he watched Lily on the concrete floor, hands bound, face bruised. He listened to Vanessa talking about 72 hours, 1 life for 1 life, sending Lily back piece by piece. He finished the video. Then he set the phone down. Then he rose, clenched his fist, and shattered the 200-kilogram oak desk with a single punch. Wood exploded. Papers flew. Marco stood in the doorway, watching with a rare look of worry. "Boss," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We need to stay calm. We need to think." Vincent turned to Marco, and that look made the man who had followed him for 20 years feel a chill crawl through him. Not anger. Something colder, darker, far more dangerous. "Call everyone in," Vincent said, his voice like ice. "Find her, at any cost." In the dark room somewhere in the city, Lily sat up, braced her back against the wall, and stared straight at the camera Vanessa had left behind. She knew they were watching. She knew Vincent would see this, and she wanted him to hear it. "He's coming," she said, calm and certain, "and you're going to wish you hadn't done this." 72 hours. The clock began to count down. The first 24 hours were hell. Vincent mobilized the organization's full force. Everyone who could carry a gun. Everyone with eyes and ears on the streets. Everyone who owed him a favor. They tore through every corner of the city, leaned on every informant, bought off every small-time criminal who might know something. But there was nothing. Not a single lead. Not a single trace. Vanessa had prepared carefully, and the Moreno family knew how to hide. From the 24th hour to the 48th, Vincent shifted to a different tactic. He sent a direct message to the Moreno family, demanding a meeting, demanding negotiations. They didn't respond. Total silence. They knew they were playing with fire, but they also knew that once it started, there was no road back. Vanessa had convinced them this was the only chance to defeat Castellano, and they'd pushed all their chips into this hand. Vincent didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He only sat in his study with the desk still shattered, replaying the video Vanessa had sent, as if he could drag a clue out of the darkness and the concrete wall behind Lily. Marco was worried. He'd never seen Vincent like this. Never seen the man he'd followed for 20 years lose control so completely. Not the kind of losing control that came with shouting or smashing things, but something worse. A frightening focus, a cold resolve Marco knew could lead to anything. Meanwhile, in an old warehouse in Red Hook, Lily wasn't sitting around waiting to die. She'd learned a lot in the months she'd spent near Vincent Castellano, and one of the most important lessons was never to wait for someone to save you. By the 36th hour, Lily had counted 4 guards. 2 rotated duty outside her door, and 2 more patrolled around the warehouse. They changed shifts every 6 hours, and in the roughly 10 minutes between shifts, there was only one person standing watch. She'd identified the position of the only window in the room, set high near the ceiling, small but big enough for someone with her build to squeeze through. She'd memorized the sound of each man's steps, who moved fast and who moved slow, who stopped to check his phone, who stayed alert at all times. And she'd noticed something else. Among the 4 guards, one of them wasn't like the others. The youngest, maybe only about 20, with eyes that kept landing on her with a kind of discomfort whenever he brought food. He didn't look at her with contempt or hostility the way the others did. He looked at her like someone who knew he was doing the wrong thing. That was his weak spot, and Lily decided to press on it. The next time he brought the food in, Lily spoke. She asked if he had family. He froze, startled. It was the first time she'd spoken to anyone since the kidnapping. He asked what she meant. Lily repeated, calm and steady. Family. A mother. A father. Brothers or sisters. Anyone. He went silent for a moment, then nodded, reluctant. He said his mother and his little sister. Lily asked if he knew what Vincent Castellano would do to the people holding her. She didn't threaten him. She simply stated what was true. Vincent would find this place. He always found the place. And when he came, he wouldn't let anyone connected to this live, including him. The young guard swallowed, his face draining. He told her she was trying to scare him. Lily shook her head and said she wasn't. She said she was giving him a choice, the only choice he had. Help her, and she'd tell Vincent to spare him. She was the only person who could do that. Or he could stay here and wait to die with the others. It was up to him. He stared at her, conflict swimming in his eyes, then turned and walked out without a word. Lily didn't know if she'd succeeded. She only knew she'd planted a seed, and now she had to wait to see whether it would take root. By the 60th hour, the young guard came back, this time alone. At midnight, while the others were resting, he looked around to make sure no one was watching, then knelt beside Lily and pressed something into her hand. A small knife. He whispered that it was the basement of the old warehouse in Red Hook. He whispered that they were going to move her at 3 o'clock in the morning to another location. That was when she could act. Lily asked his name. He said Danny. Lily repeated it, Danny, and nodded, telling him she'd remember, and she'd keep her promise. He stood and disappeared into the darkness. Lily hid the knife up her sleeve, her heart racing but her mind clearer than it had been in days. She had a weapon, she had information, and she had a chance. At 3 o'clock in the morning, footsteps sounded outside the door. More than usual. They were coming to move her. Lily lay still, pretending to sleep, her hand tight around the knife hidden in her sleeve. This was her only chance. She couldn't fail. She didn't know that 10 minutes away by car, Vincent Castellano was leading a convoy of black vehicles toward Red Hook. Information from a trader inside the Moreno family, bought with a sum no one could refuse, had brought him here. The 72 hours weren't up, but Vincent had no intention of waiting. The door swung open with a grating shriek. 2 guards stepped in, faces rigid and blank. One held a flashlight, the other carried a fresh length of rope. They had come to move her. Lily kept her eyes shut, pretending she was still asleep, letting her body go slack as if she'd finally given up. When the first man bent down and grabbed her arm, she didn't resist. She let him haul her up, head lolling forward, bare feet dragging across the floor, as if she had no strength left. The second man muttered something about her being too weak, and in that instant, when both of them let their guard down, Lily moved. She slid the knife from her sleeve and drove it straight into the arm of the man holding her. He screamed and let go, and Lily ran. She sprinted for the door, her heart hammering, her bare feet slapping against cold concrete. She heard footsteps crashing behind her, heard shouting and curses. She was almost there when a dark shape stepped into her path. Vanessa. She stood with a gun in her hand, the barrel aimed straight at Lily's face. "You think you're smart?" Vanessa said, her voice like ice. "You think you can get away?" Lily stopped, gulping air, the knife still in her hand but useless against a gun. She'd failed. She'd been so close, and she'd failed. "I was going to let you die fast," Vanessa said, her finger tightening on the trigger, "but now I think I'll let you hurt a little first." And then, at that exact moment, hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from outside, not one shot but a barrage, like deadly fireworks, screams, running feet, a door being blown open. Vanessa snapped her head toward the noise, and in that split second of distraction, Lily lunged. She didn't try to stab her. She only went for the gun, for anything that would buy time. They slammed to the floor, Vanessa shrieking and trying to shove her off, but Lily clung on as if her life depended on it, because it did. Then the room flooded with people. Gunshots closer now, things crashing, shouted orders in Italian. Lily felt someone rip Vanessa away, felt strong arms yank her upright, and then everything stopped. Silence. Gun smoke hung in the air. The smell of blood and gunpowder was so thick it made Lily gag. She stood trembling in a room littered with bodies, not knowing who was alive, who was dead, not knowing what she was supposed to do next. And then she saw him. Vincent stood in the doorway, his black suit smeared with blood, but not his own. His hair was wild, his face streaked with dust and smoke, but his eyes held only one thing. Her. Lily. His voice shook. For the first time since she'd known him, Vincent Castellano's voice trembled, as if he wasn't sure she was really there. "You came," she said, her voice trembling too. And then he was right in front of her, and then his arms were around her, and then she was being pulled hard against the chest of the man she'd once believed didn't have a heart. Vincent held her like he was afraid she'd vanish if he let go. It was something he'd never done with anyone, something Marco behind him watched with a stunned expression. Lily didn't cry. She'd forgotten how a long time ago. She only gripped his suit jacket, felt the warmth of his body, and for the first time in 72 hours, she felt safe. "Vanessa," Marco said, dragging them back to the present. "She's alive. How do you want to handle her?" Vincent released Lily and turned toward Vanessa, who was being held tight by two men. His face shifted, from relief to ruthless cold in a heartbeat. He stepped toward her, and Lily knew what he was going to do. "Don't," she said, small but enough to stop him. "Lock her up. Killing her won't bring anyone back." Vincent turned to look at Lily, his eyes dark, unreadable. A long moment passed. Then he nodded. "Take her," he ordered Marco. "Put her somewhere no one will ever find." On the drive back to the villa, Lily sat beside Vincent in the back seat of the black Mercedes. She didn't speak, and neither did he. The silence between them didn't need words. Slowly, the exhaustion of the past 72 hours crashed down like a tidal wave. Lily felt her eyelids grow heavy, her head tipped to the side, and before she realized it, she fell asleep with her head resting on Vincent's shoulder. He didn't move. The entire ride back, he sat still as stone, not daring to shift even an inch, afraid he'd wake her. For the first time in his life, Vincent Castellano was afraid of waking someone. Lily woke in a room that wasn't hers. Late afternoon sunlight cut through heavy curtains, laying pale gold bands across the high ceiling. She was stretched out on a large bed with silk sheets, her head sunk into a pillow soft as clouds. It took her a few seconds to understand where she was. Vincent's bedroom. She tried to sit up and realized her whole body ached. Her wrists had been carefully bandaged, and someone had changed her into clean clothes. She looked around and saw Vincent sitting on the corner sofa, eyes closed, head tilted to the side in an uncomfortable position. He'd slept there all night, keeping watch over her, as if he could hold her in the world just by staying near. As though he sensed her gaze, Vincent opened his eyes. They found her immediately, and in that moment Lily saw something in them she'd never seen before. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper she didn't dare name. "You're awake," he said, rising and moving toward the bed. "Dr. Reed checked you last night. Minor injuries, nothing serious, but you need to rest for at least a week." Lily nodded, then remembered. "Marco? The others?" Vincent's face darkened. Marco was hurt. A bullet went through his shoulder. "The doctor says he'll recover, but it'll take time." He paused. "2 of our men died in the rescue." Lily felt her throat close. 2 people dead. Because of her. Because they came for her. "I want to see Marco," she said. Vincent studied her for a moment, then nodded and helped her to her feet. Marco was in another room on the same floor, his left shoulder wrapped in thick bandages, his face pale but his eyes still bright. When Lily stepped in, he tried to sit up, but she hurried to stop him. "Don't move," she said, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "I'm sorry." Marco looked at her, a small smile flickering at the corner of his mouth. "Don't apologize. This is our job." 2 men died, Lily said, her voice catching. "Because of me." "No," Marco shook his head. "They died because they were loyal to the boss. That was their choice, not your fault." He looked at her with something she'd never seen from him before. Real respect. "And you saved yourself before we arrived. The guard you convinced, he contacted us and guided us in. Without him, we couldn't have gotten in without losing more men." Lily went quiet. She hadn't known Danny had done that. She remembered her promise. "Danny, is he all right?" "He's safe," Marco said. "The boss kept your promise." That afternoon, Lily found Vincent in his study, sitting with a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out the window. He didn't turn when she entered, but she knew he knew she was there. "You almost died because of me," he said, his voice low and worn. "Because you're my weakness." Lily moved closer, standing beside his chair. "I almost died because of my own choices," she said. "No one forced me to stay here. No one forced me to become your advisor. I chose, and I accept the consequences of that choice." Vincent turned to look at her, eyes dark as a moonless night, but carrying a vulnerability she'd never seen in him. "When I watched that video," he said, almost a whisper, "I didn't think about the organization. I didn't think about reputation, power, anything I've built over the past 20 years. I only thought about you. About losing you. And that—" He stopped, as if searching for the right words. "That's dangerous." "Dangerous for who?" Lily asked. Vincent looked at her, and in his eyes she saw the answer before he spoke it. "For both of us." Silence filled the room. Lily understood what he meant. In this world, feelings were a weakness. Weakness could be used. Weakness could get people killed. But she understood something else, too. She'd lived her whole life in fear. Fear of poverty. Fear of losing her mother. Fear of not being strong enough. She didn't want to live one more day that way. She reached out and laid her hand over Vincent's, the one clenched around the whiskey glass. "Maybe," she said, gentle but steady. "But I don't want safe. I want to live." Vincent looked down at her hand on his, then lifted his gaze to her face. And for the first time in his life, Vincent Castellano wanted something more than power. 1 year later, Lily Morgan's world had changed completely. She stood in front of the mirror in the room that was now officially hers on the 3rd floor of the Castellano villa, wearing a perfectly tailored black suit, her hair pinned up in a neat twist, and wondered whether the woman staring back was really her. 1 year ago, she'd been freezing to death on a park bench with $85 in her hand and a hospital bill she couldn't pay. Now she was Vincent Castellano's official advisor, the person responsible for the organization's entire legitimate side, including a chain of 12 restaurants across New York, 3 real estate companies, and an investment fund growing fast. She wasn't invisible help anymore. She was the person the capos had to listen to in every meeting. Her mother, Margaret, had recovered completely after the surgery. She lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights that Lily bought with her own salary, not Vincent's money, because she still kept that rule. Every week, she visited her mother on Sunday afternoons, sat over tea, and told her about work without mentioning anything that might make her worry. Margaret didn't ask much. She only looked at her daughter with eyes full of pride and said she knew Lily would find her way. She didn't know where that way led, and maybe that was for the best. The Castellano organization had changed too under Lily's influence. Not changed in its nature, because Lily wasn't naive enough to believe she could turn an underworld empire into a charity. But she had persuaded Vincent to shift the focus little by little toward legitimate operations. Not because of morality or conscience, but because she proved it was more profitable and far less risky. Clean money didn't need laundering. Legitimate profits didn't draw the FBI's attention. And an empire built on a solid foundation would last longer than one built on blood and gunfire. Vincent listened to her. He didn't always agree, but he listened. And gradually, step by step, the organization began to move. What made Lily proudest wasn't the numbers or the successful deals. It was the legacy program, the scholarship fund she'd created 6 months earlier. It was for the children of people who had died in the underworld, kids orphaned of a father or a mother by wars they never asked to be part of. She couldn't change the past. She couldn't bring the dead back, but she could give those children a chance at a different future, a road that didn't lead into darkness. That was how she found meaning in this world. Today was the opening ceremony for the newest restaurant in the chain, an upscale Italian place in Manhattan called Maria, named for Vincent's mother. Lily stood beside him at the entrance, reporters and guests pressing in, flashbulbs popping without pause. Vincent wore a gray suit, his hair neatly styled, looking like a successful businessman instead of a mafia boss. And when he cut the ribbon, Lily realized he was smiling, a real smile, not the cold one she'd come to know. Marco stood behind them, his left shoulder still a little stiff from the old wound but fully healed. When the crowd thinned and they stepped inside, he came up beside Lily and spoke under his breath. "You changed him. No one's done that in 20 years. Lily watched Vincent talking with a group of investors, confident and powerful as always, yet with something softer in the way he smiled. "I didn't change him," she said. "I just showed him there was another choice." Her relationship with Vincent wasn't romantic love like in the movies. There were no passionate kisses, no sworn forever promises. It was deep respect, mutual dependence, an understanding between two people who had walked through hell together and survived. It was something that couldn't be named and didn't need to be named. As the event was nearing its end, a little girl about 6 years old ran up to Lily, holding a small wildflower. The girl looked up at Lily with wide eyes and said her mother told her Lily was very brave. Lily knelt to the girl's level, accepted the flower, and smiled. She told the girl to tell her mother that her mother was brave too. The girl laughed and ran back toward a woman standing in the crowd, one of the single mothers the legacy program was supporting. Lily rose, watched the child go, and felt something warm bloom in her chest. Some stories didn't have endings, only new chapters. Early the next morning, before the sun had risen above the horizon, Lily stood alone on the balcony of the Castellano villa. The March air was still cold, but she wasn't wearing a coat. She wanted to feel that cold, wanted the reminder that she was still alive, still able to feel every breath, every heartbeat inside her chest. Below, New York City was slowly waking up. The streetlights were still on, but they were beginning to blink out as the sky shifted from black to gray to a pale blush of pink. The first cars started moving through the streets. Early walkers were taking their dogs out in a distant park. Life was beginning a new day, the way it always did, no matter what had happened in the dark. Lily looked down at her hands, the same hands that had once clutched $85 in loose change as if it were her last lifeline. 1 year ago, she'd been freezing on a bench in Central Park, not knowing whether she would live through the night. She'd let go of hope. She'd been ready to stop fighting. And then Vincent Castellano had walked past, and her world had changed forever. Now she stood here on the balcony of a $1 million villa, with a career, a purpose, a future. She had survived. She had become stronger than anything she'd ever imagined she could be, but she also carried scars no one could see. Sleepless nights, nightmares of the dark room in Red Hook, moments when a loud sound made her flinch before she could stop herself. Those scars would never fully heal, but they were proof that she had lived. Her phone vibrated. A call from her mother. Lily smiled and answered. Her mother asked if she'd had breakfast yet, her voice warm and familiar the way it had been for so many years. Lily said she hadn't. She'd just woken up. Her mother told her she had to eat a proper breakfast, not skip meals the way she used to. Lily gave a soft laugh. It was the most ordinary question in the world. A question millions of mothers asked millions of children every day. But for Lily, it meant so much more. It was proof she still belonged to the light, that no matter how far she'd gone into darkness, there was still a thread tying her to the normal world. To the simple, pure love of a mother for her daughter. Lily promised she would eat. She talked with her mother for a few more minutes about small things, about the weather, about a television show her mother was watching, about what her mother was planning to cook. Conversations so normal they could have been dull, but Lily treasured every second of them. When she ended the call, she felt a presence behind her. She didn't turn, because she knew who it was. Vincent stepped onto the balcony and stood beside her, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. He handed her one without speaking, and together they watched the sun climb over Manhattan's skyline. "Do you remember that night?" Vincent asked after a long while. "In the park? Every day," Lily said, not needing to ask which night he meant. She knew. She always would. "I thought it was the end," she went on, her voice light as breath. "I thought my story ended there, on that cold bench." Vincent turned to look at her, his eyes dark, but holding a warmth she'd learned to recognize over the past year. "No," he said. It was a semicolon. Lily looked at him, and then she laughed. Not the polite smile she'd learned to wear like a mask for years. Not the tired smile of someone who had fought too long. It was the first smile without darkness behind it. The smile of someone who had finally found where she belonged. They stood there in silence, watching the city wake up below. The streetlights faded as the sun climbed higher, bathing the buildings in a warm wash of gold. A new day began. And Lily Morgan was no longer the woman freezing on a park bench a year ago. She was no longer the invisible maid no one bothered to see. She had become something even Vincent Castellano hadn't expected. A fire that couldn't be put out. The truth doesn't whisper. The truth rings out. And sometimes the people pushed deepest into the dark are the very ones who rise highest toward the light. Lily Morgan's story isn't only a story of survival. It's a lesson in the power of resilience, in refusing to give up no matter how hard life drives you down to the bottom of the pit. She proved that where you come from doesn't define who you are, that circumstances don't get to decide your future, and that even in the blackest darkness there's always a sliver of light waiting, if you're brave enough to look for it. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button so Lily knows she isn't alone. Please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that even the coldest nights will pass. And please subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more moving stories every day. How did this story make you feel? Did it remind you of anything in your own life? Leave a comment below. We'd truly love to hear what's on your heart. Thank you for being with us. Wishing you and your family good health, a joyful life, and peace in every day. Goodbye, and we'll see you in the next video.